All right, guys, so welcome to week 6. Like I said, we have a good chat today. I wore my t-shirt, I think it's backwards because it says everything is fine. So just know if you're having any kind of freak out moments about any of your progress or anything at all, everything is fine and it's going to be fine. So this week we started off talking about limiting factors. And one of your assignments was to name or think about what could possibly be a limiting factor. So a limiting factor is pretty much anything that's going to sabotage you or hinder you from filling your habits. You know, you've been working for the last 5.5 weeks on, instilling these new actions, these new habits, these new patterns within your day. And sometimes that can go against the grain. That can go against what you normally used to do, not, just a little over a month ago. And so those patterns that you were used to doing, you developed a lifetime of doing, and you settled into it. So trying to retrain that pattern is something that does take a little bit of time. And you are going to be met with some resistance, whether it's from family members, your schedule, the way that you plan ahead for your schedule type of thing, all the things can become a limiting factor. But hopefully through this process, you have recognized them. And if you're aware of them, then that's when you can start problem solving. So a limiting factor, just think about it. It could be, we usually try to say start with what's the first meal the meal that you have the hardest time filling, So for a lot of people, and that can be a range of issues. For a lot of people, schedule time management is usually like breakfast, where they may be hungry for it, but they just are, they don't plan ahead time-wise. Their time management might be a limiting factor. Another one would be, which I think we mentioned this before, was the afternoon meals. So typically people will try to do, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the 3 meals of the day. But you may have a spot where, that in the middle afternoon, that 2 o'clock hour where you may be getting hungry and you don't have anything planned for it, and you're tired from the day, whatever happened prior to that meal, could affect what your choices are for dinner or even say your mid-afternoon type of snack. So it's not simply just thinking of time management or those big noticeable limiting factors I didn't plan for my meal. Well, okay, did you think about what happened prior to your meal? What kind of stressors did you have for the day? What affected your emotional state? Your mood, what type of mood were you in? All those things leading up to your choice that you made that either is in line with your goal or not. All those things that lead up to it matter. And so one of the exercises was to, try to plan out your perfect day. If you had all the stars aligned and everything just happened like you wanted it to, you hit your meals, you weren't hungry, you weren't stressed out, you weren't tired. That never happens. All the stars don't align always like that. But if it did, hypothetically, let's see what that day looks like. Write it out. And then you can see where, okay, if this needs to happen, I need to do X, Y, and Z prior to that. I need to anticipate the limiting factor. This is my end goal. I know this thing might sabotage me. So let me see if I can, get around that logjam, get around that limiting factor, whatever it is, whether it's a family member, a party, an event, or whatever it is. You need to think ahead of how this is going to play out so they don't become limiting factors. Now, there are some limiting factors that are just going to be in your life. My husband loves to eat terrible food. He loves to eat pizza almost every weekend, though I will say he is cleaning things up as of this January. I think the whole quarantine shut down year 2020 kind of got the best of him, and he's ready to rock. But so he hasn't been doing that as of late, but he notoriously is a terrible eater and will eat all the junk food, and and he's one of my limiting factors. Another limiting factor of mine is when I go to other people's houses that have snacks. I will just mow through some like snacky little things just because they're not in my house, and I know that I'm not going to eat them all the time. But for some reason, when I go over to a friend's house and they have their kids' snacks, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to eat an Oreo. Or, ooh, I'm going to eat marshmallows out of the Lucky Charms cereal box at my sister's house. You know, there's just some things that are limiting factors that are triggers for you. So that exercise is going to try to keep you more in where you're aware. Because if you're not aware, there's no way that you can change. And that's the name of the game, awareness. But then today was a great lesson. We taught, I think it was emotional versus rational. And that kind of plays off of what limiting factors are, you know, so we don't necessarily want to make emotional, just split second type of decisions. We want to be that rational thinking. And so when you think about emotional versus rational choices, of course, like I said, with limiting factors and how you go throughout your day, what is controlling your choices? Are you reacting to what happens to you, or are you in the clear enough mind where you can say, okay, this cake is in the, break room at the office, but I don't really need that today. Or are you caught off surprise and you're like, oh, it's somebody's birthday and I'm just going to do it just because it's there. No, you don't have to celebrate everybody's birthday with cake. Are you controlled by your emotional side, or are you controlled by your rational side? And determining that is going to, and whatever you choose, emotional or rational, is going to determine whether you like short-term gratification or are you in it for the long game. And I'll give you one choice to know what we're in. We're in for the long game. So sometimes you got to be okay with saying no to those short-term gratification choices or taste bud bliss for that split second, just so you can play the long game. Funny enough, like I had this conversation through message with one of my clients about, they asked, are you ever going to not crave these certain foods? Are you ever not going to crave pizza or cake or whatever it is? And this is me talking to me personally. I will always love to eat those foods. I will always love cake. Who doesn't? I will always love to eat and think that those things taste good. But what changes, and what we're trying to get you guys to get to that point where we say you become the habits, or you become the process, you live within the process. It's not that you ever really never want those foods again. It's just that you want the benefits that you're getting from other foods more. So your value, what you value, changes. So like where in one life or prior to CK, you could have been living in that life where you live for those short-term gratification, where you live for that, taste bud bliss in the moment, not really thinking about what it's going to do long-term, But as you go through this process and as you start to see the benefits, the other non-scale victory benefits of eating this way, and the way that builds up your health rather than takes away from your health, that's when your values start to change. So it doesn't become like, oh, I'm depriving myself of this meal. You start thinking about it differently, where you're like, no, I just really don't want to feel like crap. So that's a big motivating factor for me whenever I choose not to eat something that's not in line with my goals or not part of my 80%. It's because I don't want to feel bad. It's not necessarily that I don't want that food, or I'm not like, wanting to have a taste of it. It's just that maybe I have something that I have to do that next day that I want to feel my best for. And so that's why I choose, So it doesn't always have to be this, I'm choosing this because I want to lose weight or I want to keep body fat off. It becomes something more. And so that's where the shift will start. And my timer went off, but we're going to go. That's when the shift will start in your mind, and it gets easier to choose the, habit filling meals that are in line with your goals over the other ones. And that's a process. That's a process that is practiced. You're not going to be perfect. I eat pizza, I eat cake. For my birthday, I ate chicken and waffles and strict strawberry cake, which completely goes against my moral code to do. But I did it, and I didn't feel guilty about it. I was fine. I had it. I moved on, whatever. I didn't feel the best. I had a headache. I felt sluggish, so it's a good, healthy reminder when you do go off the rails of why you eat that, eat the habits. So it's a good natural reminder for that. And that's another motivating factor to get back on the train. I couldn't wait to eat some green and drink some water the next day, guzzling it, doing my best. So it all comes together, and you just have to keep going. The next lesson that y'all are going to get is tomorrow, I believe, and it's about the 80-20 rule. And I'm not gonna go too much into it, but the 80-20 rule is not necessarily this finite number. Like, I know y'all been using your meal compliance chart, and that is a great visual tool to help you figure out what is your personal 80-20. Because this is one thing that you need to remember, everybody's 80-20, everybody's 20%, the way that they measure it is going to be different. So like where the standards that I hold for my habits are going to be different from somebody else's. Like where I'm filling out my meal compliance chart based off of what I deem compliant and what I can stick to consistently and know it's going to get me towards my goal. One thing that we don't like to do is put numbers on a lot of things in like calorie count, is because people get obsessed with those numbers and they're not focusing on the quality of it. So the 80-20 is not necessarily finite numbers, it's more of a perspective. And when I say that, I mean, a lot of people tend to try to, I don't want to say cheat the system. They just try to play the system of like, all right, this is the max I can eat to fill my 20%. So they're focusing on what I can do in my 20% rather than putting all the focus on what is your 80%. So rather than focusing on what it could fill the 20%, you need to focus on what should be your 80%, meaning that whatever you eat, do your best. Okay, that is your 80%. And that's what you're striving to do majority of the time. Whatever else happens, that's the 20%. 20% could be like a glass of wine with a habit-filling meal, or a cookie or something random, like little bitty blips here and there in a near perfect day of food. That's the type of 20% eating that you want. That's the type of 80-20 mindset. Now, if you're gonna go on a blowout meal like I did for my birthday, own it. Just do it, move on. Just don't do a lot of them. I say if you're looking for body composition changes, of course, doing less blowout meals like that is going to get you there faster. So, I have this personal rule of going 2 weeks without some kind of blowout meal. I can have some little dips here and there, like, little treats or whatever, but nothing major. I'm just trying to focus on filling that 80%. I'm trying to focus on mostly of the good. And so when my head gets there and I say, okay, well, this is fine. I'm not having too many of those blowout meals one after the other. That's when progress can start happening. So I went over, I'm sorry. but that's just the way that I am, and y'all are gonna have to deal with it. Read that lesson tomorrow. It's 80-20. You're gonna get another 80-20 lesson a little bit later in the challenge, because a lot of people ask me, like, how do you measure your 20%? And that's where we'll dive a little bit more. But just know that we're focusing on problem solving. So everybody's got limiting factors, but there's always a way around them. You just got to be aware of what that limiting factor is coming up. We don't want to be emotional people whenever we're making choices. We want to be rational and playing the long game. Sometimes you have to be okay with saying no in the short term to get what you want long term. All right. And then finally, 80-20, it's focus on filling that 80%, being majority of the time, trying to get your habits, and then whatever happens after that is just kind of that trickle 20%. I hope y'all felt inspired and you learned something from that one. Next week, actually, we will not have a live coaches chat because I'm going out of town. But we are going to have videos of a past coaches chat that we just nailed it, hit it out of the park. Like, we crushed it. Me and Steve did. So it's a really good one. You'll see those videos coming up next week in your app. So be looking for those. And then I will see y'all in week 8 for continuing on with the live coaches chats. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.